I do wonder, and there is some speculation that maybe they did that so that if he doesn't move the needle at all, or worse, like truly has an epic flop in June, that they then have an open convention.
Naomi Klein, congratulations. The book is so topical and, dealing as it does in conspiracies and disinformation. I suppose my first thought is that the world has got even darker since you wrote it.
When I was writing it, I sort of had um, a loop, a Leonard Cohen lyric in my head, which was "You want it darker,"
Mm.
and it did seem to that the lights were going out as I was writing the book, and there are some signs of hope out there, but yeah, I can understand that feeling.
I suppose one of the reasons that people feel under siege if they're on the left or even, in the center of politics is they see what's going on in America. They see what's happening with Donald Trump. Do you worry? Do you think he's going to win the election?
Don't worry, everybody is worried, and I think that we're very late in the we're very late in this story to I think reckon with what a weak candidate Joe Biden is running against Trump. Trump has so much uh, seems to have more momentum behind him, and I really really wish that the Democrats had come to their senses and run somebody other than Joe Biden. But
Mm.
they don't have the same system as you do here, where you're constantly having palace coups against your leader. I think that if we did in the U.S., there would have been one, but it really is up to Biden whether or not he continues to run. There's not much his party can do.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because we're seeing the pictures of him at the G7 where he looks really frail and really old. Is it really too late for the Democrats to have a kind of palace coup, as you suggest?
Look, I'm not really a political pundit, electoral political pundit, but I will say that the convention is at the end of August, and it is somewhat interesting that the Democrats requested to have a debate between Biden and Trump in June. So I think that's going to be the first one is going to be happening next week. So the optimist in me believes that they chose to do this because it is unconventional to have a debate before the convention, because the convention is when the candidate the candidate is officially chosen, right? So they requested to have this debate in June. So I do wonder, and there is some speculation that maybe they did that so that if he doesn't move the needle at all, or worse, like truly has an epic flop in June, that they then have an open convention,
Mm.
and then quickly try to run who. That's the problem, because if they were going to run somebody other than Biden, they would have needed more of a runway for that person to raise their profile.
Yeah.
There was talk of Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, but she's not a household name, right?
Yeah. So it's really a sort of it would be a very high stakes gamble to do anything now. But,
Yeah,
the
and Kamala
stakes,
Harris is not more popular than him, is the problem, right? Um,
yeah. Yeah, but the stakes are high because it's really urgent for the world, for America and the world, to have someone strong enough to bring that country together and stand up to the big tech companies, I guess, who are helping perpetuate these conspiracy theories that you write about.
yeah, but unfortunately, I can't solve this for you. I mean, we're all just puzzling over how it could have gotten to this point. And I think Biden, because he beat Trump before, has this kind of distorted image of himself that he is the sort of Trump killer, that he knows how to beat Trump. But I think that had more to do with running against an incumbent Trump in the middle of a pandemic that he was blowing, and people do have short term memories, and right now he seems he's not carrying all that burden. It seems like a long time ago to a lot of people. Yeah.
I mean, we're relying on strong politicians, strong leaders, of which there is a sort of desperately short supply around the world at the moment, to tackle the power of the tech companies who have sort of unleashed this torrent of conspiracy theories and online extremism. Um,
But
is
I
it?
don't think it's just about the tech companies
Mhm.
It is certainly there is a business model that is monetizing our attention, and a wild theory that seems to explain what feels like a great deal of brokenness in our economy and in our society is going to get more traction, more attention. Um, but I don't think that it would work to the extent that it's working if it wasn't tapping into something real, which is simply to say that I think part of Biden's weakness is that people don't have faith that he is going to address the cost of living crisis,
Mm,
or the fact that people can't afford housing in so many of the U.S.'s major cities.
yeah.
Um, and so that's I say in the book that conspiracy culture often gets the facts wrong, but the feeling's right, and the feeling is really important because the feeling is something that could be addressed with rigorous policy. But when that doesn't happen, I think people are more inclined to take a flight into fantasy
Mm. And
or
you know
just
the
to look
same.
for a scapegoat.
And those same feelings that you talk about, the grievances about not, the political systems, economic systems letting people down, also fed into the Brexit vote that we had here in the UK. I wonder then if you have any optimism that Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has the answers. He's got this huge poll lead, but do you have any confidence, any hope that he can put things back together, or is he very reliant on the kind of old world order?
Right. I mean, I am concerned that we are in a change moment. I think globally, where a lot of people are voting to upend the status quo, I live in Canada, and right now that status quo is Justin Trudeau, is liberalism, right? And people are about to elect, if our polls are to be believed, a pretty extreme right wing leader, whose slogan is "Canada is broken." Sounds familiar, right? Uh,
Hmm.
in the UK, because the Tories have been in power for 14 years, they are getting the blame. But if Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, when I'll say, okay, understanding things can change, when they take power, um, do little other than steady the ship, right? But if it steadies in a place that is not addressing the cost of living crisis, is not addressing the fact that the NHS is failing so many people because it's been systematically underfunded, or whatever you could point to, housing affordability. If those underlying drivers aren't addressed, my concern is that next time around, people are going to be going further to the right and further to blaming migrants, blaming the unhoused, just at least kind of, sometimes this is described as kind of kicking the dog politics, like at least you're doing better than them. And then that's all that politics can really offer, is a sort of a momentary frisson of feeling, better than. And that's when things get scary. I mean, this is where my research or my tumble down the rabbit hole of doppelgangers uh, led me to understand that the figure of the doppelganger is often used in literature and film to warn us about the fact that we as entire societies can have our own evil twin. A society can flip from one thing into another. It can flip from democratic to authoritarian. It can flip from a secular to theocratic. And I think many of us feel that, that fear of that flip in our peripheral vision, almost, that it feels so proximate, certainly in the US. Certainly friends in India tell me they feel it they feel that fear where the neighbor down the street joins the mob attacking you. And so there are costs, I would say, to papering over these issues that demand real redress.
But has anyone, in your view, got the answers? Does anyone give you hope, any political leader, that they have a sort of new solution that really is a sort of dismantling, as you say, and putting it all back together?
I don't think there's anything magic, and I think it's probably predictable that as a lifelong leftist, believe we need more leftism. I confess that my answer is a little bit predictable in that way. But I think if we look globally, there is some evidence that that countries, and you can point to exceptions to this, but that countries that have a more robust social safety net, a more social democratic tradition, are a little bit more resilient in the face of these demagogic appeals. So even in India, for instance, like southern states like Kerala that have that stronger tradition of really taking care of each other, they are very resistant to Modi's appeals. Is one example. I was interested to see that Spain didn't join the right-wing surge in the European elections. But of course, you can point to counterexamples like Sweden. So I don't think that there is anything.
And Germany. I mean, the rise of the far right in Germany.
The rise of the far right in Germany, but the current government in Germany, which is part of I would say, the disillusionment. People had hoped that this coalition, which includes the Greens, might usher in something genuinely new, and it really hasn't. And I do believe that sets the table for the right. I think Macron also. I'm terrified of this gamble of his. It's a little bit like Biden, where he's like, well, I've beat Trump before, I can beat him again. And I think Macron has that similar sort of complacency of like, well, I've used fear to beat back Le Pen before, and I'll just do it again. I'll just ride the fear from the European elections to one more electoral victory. But I'm not sure it's going to work this time, because I think fear is just not enough. At a certain point, people are so determined to kind of stick it to the establishment that they might just deliver exactly what they fear most.
And you say you're terrified of what you see on the horizon in Europe. I mean, all around the world, we're seeing the rise of fascism, of extremism. There's military conflict around the world. Is it horribly? It is horribly reminiscent to the build-up to World War II. Do you fear that is where we're heading, another global war, or maybe we're already there?
Wow, and this has gotten cheerful.
I know.
No, I mean, I don't mean to sound glib. I think a lot, I study the climate crisis. That's what I teach, and most of my research is about. And I think part of what is driving politics right now doesn't get articulated enough, which is that we all know, whether we're conscious of it or not, whether we talk about it very much or not, that our very home, our shared planet, is in crisis, and that large parts of this planet are rapidly becoming unlivable. I mean, that I'm sure you saw those images of massive floods in Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul. Or think about floods on an even larger scale in Pakistan last year, where the temperature in Delhi, just impossibly hot. And so governments in the global north, the wealthier governments, are fortressing their borders. And what I fear is that this is a kind of climate change adaptation that will not even speak its name, right? That we know that people are being forced from their homes. It's not just climate change; it's climate, it's war, it's failed crops, it's economic inequality. It's a kind of a stew, but whatever it is, we're seeing. We are seeing many more people, and more people to come, needing to leave to find safety. So I think what's really on the line here is our very humanity, whether or not we are going to figure out how to share the livable parts of this planet. And that's where I really fear austerity politics, because what I've seen again and again is that we're a mess, we humans, but we do try to help each other often. Think about Germany opening their doors and their borders to Syrian refugees not that long ago. Or I've seen in the aftermath of wildfires and hurricanes, neighbors just helping each other in extraordinary ways. But when people have a feeling of scarcity, that they can't afford the basics of life, then they're less likely to approach these disasters in a spirit of solidarity. So I think we need politics that build in what I call shock absorbers, so that we know there are going to be these shocks that come. And if there's a little bit more slack in the system, if we fund our healthcare better, if we really invest in affordable housing, then when those shocks happen, we might be able to respond with our better angels. That's
Right.
another thing doppelgangers teach us, is that we contain multitudes. That's why we're so fixated on the idea that there might be another us walking around. Because on some level, we know that that we ourselves could turn into something different. That's what Freud said about the doppelganger, is that they speak to the fact that we that the self that we are is the result of a series of decisions that we make and
Mm.
other people make.
Well, as you say, we've got rather bleak talking about the end of the world and World War III and so on. So I want to just drift back to books, if I may. Although there is a common theme, which is climate change and fossil fuel companies, because several book festivals have cut their ties with the investment firm Bailey Gifford over fears about the firm's link to both Israel but also fossil fuel companies as well. Do you think that artists who protested against the sponsorship by Bailey Gifford had a point, or are they in danger through sort of moral purity in a way, potentially rendering arts festivals unsustainable?
I don't think that it was the goal of any of those activists when they um, wrote a letter highlighting um, their issues with Bailey Gifford. It was not a call for a boycott of the festivals. It was just raising awareness. Some people chose to withdraw from the festivals. Some people chose to attend. Some people chose to attend and read a statement. But what was clear was that Bailey Gifford was only involving itself in these book festivals because it was good for PR. But the thing about writers and the thing about journalists, and you know this, is that journalists are troublemakers, and writers tend to research and are a pretty unruly bunch. And so I think actually we've spent plenty time blaming activists and writers for what is essentially what it is an issue of a sponsor going into the arts and then bailing as soon as they face any kind of serious scrutiny. Um, I don't think this is about purity politics, frankly. I think it's about desperation. I think people, I think UK foreign policy on Gaza is out of step with UK public opinion. People overwhelmingly want a ceasefire. People overwhelmingly do not want to continue arming a state that is under investigation by the ICJ and the ICC. And there's a sense that nothing has worked. I mean, people have been marching in the streets now for 7 months, and so they're looking for levers where they might exert some pressure. Nobody believes that this is the proper, the optimal place to make foreign policy. It would be nice if we had governments who acted in the face of these crises that we've been discussing. But when they don't, people are going to look for pressure points, and that's why I say this is not about purity. It's about desperation. It's about seeing what is happening in Gaza, seeing these war crimes, wanting to find pressure. And I think it's quite scandalous that Bailey Gifford, after claiming this commitment, not just to the arts, but to books, to writers. And we know that writers do research. We know that these festivals are spaces for debate. And when they faced a little scrutiny, they rather than divest, rather than do the right thing, they've stranded these festivals. And I would
Well,
like
well,
to see
some of the
more.
but some of the festivals severed the links, rather than in the other way around. They waved goodbye to Bailey Gifford. But I wonder whether you think
Because
it
Bailey Gifford
can.
wouldn't divest. Yeah.
Okay, so right, yeah, I understand what you're saying. But do you think the money can be found elsewhere? Because if the consequence is that these arts festivals go under, would it have been better to sort of swallow one's dissatisfaction with this sponsorship and just, if I understand what you're saying about the PR for the company, but if the consequence is that these festivals go under, that seems a bit self-defeating, doesn't it?
Like I said, I think people are looking for points of pressure, and their primary concern is saving lives in Gaza. Nobody wanted this outcome, but this to me, would be a little bit like if a newspaper ran an investigation of a corporation finding malpractice somewhere, and then the corporation cut their advertisements, and then we blamed the journalist. We wouldn't do that.
Mm.
This was research that I got that letter, and when I got it, I signed it. I was happy that this research was done to tell me about this company that was sponsoring these festivals. It wasn't a boycott. and I think what we're seeing is that this is a very unstable way to fund the arts.
Yeah.
And I love these festivals. I love the Hay Festival. I love the Edinburgh Festival. I've appeared at both of them. They are very important for writers, particularly new writers. They're important to readers. And if we cherish them, I think we're seeing that we need to ask our governments to fund them.
Right. So yeah,
Because
so
we can't rely on these quixotic companies who are going to leave as soon as there's a little bit of heat.
although I mean, people might say in a cost of living crisis, the arts is very low down the pecking order. In your view, the money can and must be found.
I think so, yeah, and I think the arts are incredibly important.